Good evening. I think we're going to get started. My name's Kim Kleiner, and I'm co-chair of the Nashua League of Women Voters with my very good friend, Gwen Mikhailov. We'd like to thank you very much for attending the forum tonight. So this is the third forum that we've had. We have another tomorrow evening, the Board of Education, and then another next week, Wards 1, 2, and 3. We'd like to thank the National Public Library for hosting all of the forums, and the National Telegraph for sponsoring them with us. But most of all, we'd like to thank you for being here, and for the candidates for giving up their time and speaking the issues. Our forum this evening is going to be moderated by Liz Tetronelli, who comes from the State League of Women Voters, and we thank Liz very much for moderating all of our forums for us. Thank you, Liz.
Okay, thank you. It's such a delight to be back here again, and I'll be here again next week and tomorrow night. But Nashua is an exciting city, and I know all of you are very proud of it, so we're going to have a good time tonight. First of all, some housekeeping. Please turn off your cell phones. Even receiving text messages interferes with the taping of the forum. It will be broadcast on Access Nashua cable TV station, so please do take care of that. And the other thing is that in order to allow the most time for questions and answers, I'm going to ask that you hold off your applause. We'll give a big round at the end to everybody. We're very proud of the League of Women Voters in the greater Nashua area for all the work that they've done to organize this. And they have already thanked the library and the Nashua Telegraph and Access Nashua for taping this, so it's wonderful. Now, when you came in, you probably got some biographical information on the candidates. If not, you can pick it up on your way out. And there are also some folders there, brochures from last week's forum with the Alderman at Large candidates. If you have written out a question and have already turned it in, that's wonderful. If not, if you've got one in your hot little hand, hold it up, and our volunteers from Nashua High School South are running around collecting them. And if you think of a question a little bit later on, you can hold it up, and as soon as they notice it, they will get it. Now, we probably won't be able to ask everybody's question tonight. And in fact, we noticed in the last two forums that some people were getting a little tired of hearing all the candidates answer the same question. So in order to keep you awake, that was very rude of me. I apologize. In order to keep up interest, I think is what I wrote on my notes. We're going to try something a little different. That is, I'm going to ask a question of three of the candidates in order. And then if one of the other candidates really, really wants to chime in, they have a little card they can hold up. And they get to chime in on that. But they can't chime in on everyone. They've only got 3 cards. And my friend Kate in the front row, wave at them, Kate, she's keeping track of this. All right? Now, the other thing we're going to explain is the timing. So I have 2 friends in the front row who are going to alert you when you come to 30 seconds towards the end of your presentation. And then, when you hit the end, you'll see the stop sign. Finish your sentence. Don't make it extra long, please. Just finish your sentence. Now, we're going to have 2-minute opening statements. In general, 1.5 minutes to answer questions. And then at the end, you'll have a minute to say whatever you would like that we didn't cover already, okay? So if you've got something really burning that you want to tell the voters, that will be your chance as well. All right, I think that is all our preparation. So we drew cards to see who is going to begin the opening statements and begin the closing statement rounds. And we're going to have those opening statements in just a moment. So, everybody ready? We're going to have fun? Yes, we are. Oh, who's chuckling there? Come on now, behave. Okay, remember, you're writing out questions too. We have some here already. You're also writing some out. So we're going to start with opening statements, and the person who drew the low card, and we'll start that, is for Ward 9, Linda Harriet Gathright. Linda.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us, as well as the library and Nashua Telegraph. And thank you, community, for coming out to greet us. I'm running to represent my constituents, my family, myself, in moving Nashua forward. I've served in New Hampshire legislature, writing budgets, serving on the committee, Hillsborough County Committee, approving budgets. I'm seeking to agree on policies and practices in the city that will move us forward. I retired from Verizon after 34 and a half years of service, non-management and management positions. I worked in a team of 400 to 240 people. It was my team, my personnel. I've served on many boards and co-founder of several community organizations in Nashua and other cities in New Hampshire. I also understand the plight of teachers, and I serve as a substitute teacher and sub-para when I can. I'm very active in the community as an advocate for civil rights and social justice. I view the state of our city as needing to move forward with innovations and jobs that will attract young people and young families, as well as encouraging our children that leave for higher education to return. Thank you.
Thank you. June Karen, Ward 7.
Thank you. My name is June Karen, and I have been the Ward 7 Alderman for the past 6 years. I'm a Nashua native, and I have lived in Crown Hill for over 60 years. So I pretty well know that area of the city. I was a superintendent of the city of Nashua Park Recreation for over 42 years. So that kind of gives me input as to what city needs are and how the city runs and what we're trying to do. I think the biggest thing that aldermen need to do for the city and its community is to try to be there and to answer questions, to help them when they're having a problem and don't know where to go. I've done that over the years, trying to figure out how to get neighborhoods safer, how to help people figure out who they need to go to when they're having issues with their neighborhoods or their neighbors. So I would like to continue as the ward alderman for Ward 7 for the next 2 years. And I thank you all for coming tonight, and I thank the League of Women Voters in the library and TV for broadcasting this again. Thank you.
Thank you. And Drew Sullivan, also Ward 7.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Drew Sullivan. I'm running as the alderman, or for alderman of Ward 7. Not exactly trying to take over June Karen's territory. I wish her the best of luck, but we'll see how this all goes. So I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I served with the U.S. Army for 4 years. Born and raised in Nashua for many years until being shipped out, obviously. So I spent most of my time over in Germany, bouncing between Germany, Iraq, and Colorado. After spending many years in Colorado, decided to come back home to my hometown and just realized that there was a lot of things around the city that I feel should have been changed not too long ago. So I'm decided to run for alderman, see what I can do to help make our community start feeling a little bit more like actual communities so that people will feel a lot safer when they go outside. People will feel safer walking downtown, simple things such as parking your car in a garage. I don't think that people should feel unsafe in these areas. I think that the mayor so far has done a very excellent job with the direction that he's been taking the city as far as the way that everything looks. And I'm just hoping to help make a significant impact into the city, the everyday life, and to the people that live here.
Thank you. And running for Ward 8, Marianne Malitzi-Golia.
Thank you. I'm Marianne Melizzi-Golia. I am the current Alderwoman for Ward 8. I'm finishing up my 4th term. My husband and I moved here 21 years ago as part of a transfer with his position. And when we moved here, we had a 5-year-old and hoped we would be here for at least 6 years so she could get through elementary school. And here we are 21 years later. She's graduated from Nashua High South and moved on, and we are still here. As a member of the Ward 8 community, as well as the city of Nashua, I've served on the Bicentennial PTO, both as a volunteer as well as one of the co-presidents. I served a term on the Board of Education, and I've been involved with PAL, Head Start, in terms of their policy council in Manchester, and I coordinate the Nashua Goes Back to School event with the Chamber and George Cadis. Professionally, I work as a speech pathologist and have worked with families with children birthed through elementary school, and I'm currently employed in Hudson in one of their elementary schools. I'm seeking re-election because I truly enjoy what I do, and as part of what I do for Ward 8, I view it as my responsibility to hear people and their thoughts about the city as well as to respond to their concerns, be it traffic, snow plowing, paving, and also to make decisions around the horseshoe that will support the character of our neighborhood as well as the vitality of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Also running in Ward 8 is David McLaughlin, who sent his regrets that he couldn't be here tonight because of some family health issues. So we're sorry he couldn't join us, but he does want you to consider him also in Ward 8. Running in Ward 9, Mr. John. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Flynn. Sorry, I went out of order. My mistake. I apologize.
Not a problem. First of all, I'd like to thank the League and the Public Library and the Telegraph for sponsoring this event. It's an excellent forum, and I really appreciate being provided the opportunity tonight. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a 44-year resident of the city. I wasn't born here, but I've spent a significant part of my youth here in the city. Went to school here, graduated high school, went off to college. After college, I came back, married my wife Tammy. We celebrated 35 years this past August. We raised a family here in Nashua. We have 2 great kids, 2 great boys, and them being in the city of Nashua was a big part of how they turned out. Obviously, our parenting skills, but the city with the opportunities it presented in terms of athletics and activities and things at the school. So to that, we owe a debt of gratitude to the city. I'm running for the Board of Aldermen because being involved in my community has and always will be a big part of what I'm all about. I started coaching basketball 25 years ago with June. I've been active in my church. Through my company, BA Systems, I've been involved in various committees at the United Way, so it's given me an opportunity to learn more about some of the health and human services needs in the city. I've been an active fundraiser. I ran the Chick-fil-A holiday basketball tournament, and I'm very proud that in the 10 years I was involved in it, we raised over $100,000 for athletics in the school district. I've always thought about wanting to serve in this capacity, but the time wasn't right. I just didn't feel I had the time. Now I do, I believe I have the time. My management and leadership skills from working at BA Systems for almost 35 years, my formal education, I think I've developed an excellent business acumen over the years. And collectively, I just think it all comes together to make me what I think is a viable candidate for the Ward 9 Alderman seat. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. John,
Thank you.
also Ward 9.
Good evening. My name is Jan John, and as an immigrant from Korea, I am living the American dream. Having benefited from what America has offered me, I view this as an opportunity to serve and give back. My family and I lived in Nashua for 10 years between 1987 and 1997, and we moved back from Lexington, Massachusetts last year. 2 of our 3 children started at Bicentennial Elementary in Nashua over 20 years ago. And now my wife and I are empty nesters, and we're really glad to be back in New Hampshire. I've spent well over 30 years in management positions in high-tech and financial services. I've got science and engineering degrees from MIT, UC Berkeley, as well as an MBA from Suffolk University in Boston. In talking with neighbors around Ward 9, it seems that people are pretty happy with the state of things in Nashua, which is great news. One major concern I've heard is traffic, especially with cars speeding too fast through neighborhoods. That seems to be a recurring theme. And I think another major concern is the economy, especially for the more than 13% of the population in Nashua that are senior citizens. Did you know that Nashua's combined budget has increased by almost $40 million over the past 8 years? And that's a 16% increase. Yet the Social Security cost of living adjustments have only been 9% in the same time, meaning the budgets have increased almost twice as fast as the Social Security increase in payments. In fact, 3 out of the last 8 years, there was a 0% increase in the cost of living adjustment. And last year, it was 0.3%. And have you looked recently at what banks are paying on savings accounts? Not much. Hopefully, we see signs of economic improvement, but things are still very precarious. And I believe that city government needs to be very careful about how it's serving public needs. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to start with some questions, and I'm going to start here with Ms. Karen. And we're going to let 3 people answer this question. You're going to have the Performing Arts Center, the conversion of a building into the Performing Arts Center on the ballot. And the question is, if the public votes for it, would you support it? And if so, why or why not? Ms. Karen?
Thank you. I did vote for the Performing Arts Center when it came before the full board. And when it didn't pass, I also agreed with the thought that we should put it out to the voters and let them know. My only concern was that we make sure that the private sector puts up the $4 million that they said that they could raise within a year to 18 months. I think it's important that the city look at this. Being a resident of Nashua and an employee for a long time, there were a lot of opportunities that the city had that we skipped over. And then we look up north and we see Manchester with a stadium, with a new baseball field and what have you. And I think the time is now that we put the Performing Arts Center together. Hopefully it'll be downtown, but if it isn't, if that's what they decide they don't want to do, then that's fine too. But I think we have to come together as a community and really look at this. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, if the voters say yes, what would you vote?
I think that the Performing Arts Center is actually a really great idea in theory. I just don't think that it's completely feasible to put together at this time. Provided in the future that there is a lower cost to it and a lot more private funding to actually get everything off the ground, I could see it happening. But the fact is that we have a Performing Arts Center in the town, and what's become of it? Nobody ever talks about it. Nobody really even knows where it is. What's to say that if we just open up a new shiny one, that it's not going to fall into the exact same category as the current Performing Arts Center that we have now?
Ms. Melizzi-Golio?
Thank you. Yes, and in the chamber, when this came to a vote, I supported it. I also supported putting this on the ballot. I think that although we do have 2 venues in the city, the Keefe Auditorium and the Court Street Theater, when you look at what's being proposed, it's a very different type of venue that provides many different opportunities that we've been told by people in the theater are not available through either the Keefe Auditorium or the Court Street Theater. And I think when we look at the vitality of the city and our ability to attract new businesses and new residents, one of the things we recently learned was that Amazon's looking for a place to locate that has rail. And we've heard people say, oh, maybe we should look at rail and fast-track rail. Well, that's kind of too late because we gave up the money to do the study. So I think we need to be forward-looking. In our city, we have Holman, we have Greeley Park, we have Stellos, we have Conway Arena, we have the David Dean Skate Park, we have our many neighborhood parks and pools, and I think it's time we look at providing a performing arts venue that both visual and performing artists are able to use. Like Alderman Karen, I think we need to be cautious about where the private funding is coming from and work to obtain as many bonds or grants as possible. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Did anyone else want to chime in? Oh, look at that, they want to use their green cards.
Phone a friend.
All right, Mr. Flynn.
Sorry? 1
Yeah,
minute.
short answer,
Yeah.
short answer for the bonus, yes, 1 minute, thank you.
If I was voting, I would obviously vote the way my ward voted, based on the ward, the ballot question. I personally feel strongly about the Performing Arts Center. I think it adds to the quality of life, which attracts businesses, retains businesses, attracts families, so on and so forth. I do not support the city being the one to run it. I would support purchasing the property to take it off the market, to buy us the time to look at this as a privately run enterprise, much like the Palace Theater, much like the Capitol Center, much like the Tupelo Music Hall over in Derry. I would say the city sometimes has a history for not being bold. You look at the great things we've done at Holman Stadium. It's great that we have the Silver Knights. 20 years ago, we had the opportunity to do the same thing, and we could have had what is today the Portland Sea Dogs, but we don't. So we get around to doing good things, but I think we need to be bold and do them when the opportunity is there to do them. Thank you.
All right, and Mr. John, you
Yeah,
want to do that?
just a point of clarification.
Go ahead.
Do we have a minute or a minute and a half? I thought you said.
Minute and a half for this bonus answer.
Yes, okay.
I'm
You-
sorry, a minute.
minute.
A minute,
cut it
oh, okay.
Luckily, I was short.
Yeah.
A minute when you hold up
I'll
the
get 2
card.
minutes
Okay,
next
all
time,
right.
The
right?
card
Yeah.
gets you a minute.
Card gets you a minute, all right.
Don't be 30 seconds.
I thought the Board of Aldermen abdicated its responsibility by not carrying forward with their vote, and I was very disappointed in that action, because I don't think the citizens are going to have the time to do the due diligence to examine all the information and make the right decision. So this is a very emotional thing. I mean, I made all my kids play 2 instruments. I love the performing arts. They play piano, I'm learning guitar. But you have to take a look at the details and the facts. This is the pro forma that was put together, and it's hardly any information whatsoever. This is the IRS 990 for the Palace Theater. I did not see this presented anywhere. And you can take a look at the Palace Theater in Manchester, 890 seats. They are not making any money at all. So without $500,000 to $1 million a year in contributions, it's not a going concern. So again, people will vote on their emotions, and I think they'll make the wrong decision. $4 million will generate $140,000 in contributions. You're going to have to get another $500,000 to $1 million, which is about 3 times that amount in terms of endowment to support an ongoing operation.
Thank you. Did you have a card you were waving
Yes, I
around?
did. Yes, I
Ms.
did.
Galbraith.
If my constituents or the city vote for that, the folks here, then I would be 100% for it as well. I'm sure that the Board of Aldermen will work together to come with the correct solution, and I hope to be a part of that.
All right, thank you. Our second question is about the lawsuit pending against the city. I understand it's in the judge's hands now. If it is successful, this is about overriding the spending cap. If the lawsuit is successful to say that overriding the spending cap was illegal, would you vote in future to override the spending cap, or would you vote to cut city services? Hard choices. And I'm asking this of the Ward 9 candidates. Mr. Flynn, you're first.
Okay, thank you. I do support the spending cap. I think it's a good framework that drives hopefully effective and efficient budgeting. Not intimate with the budgeting process that's used here in Nashua, but I am a strong proponent of bottoms-up budgeting, not necessarily repeating what we spent last year. We need to justify why we need what we need this year. I expect budgets to be defendable. I would expect to be able to understand why something has been added to the budget, why something has been increased from last year. As far as the spending cap goes, I don't think I do not think that it's a indication from the citizens that the city of Nashua should be driven off a cliff. If I believe as an alderman that the budgeting process has been effective, that the numbers are believable and they're you can substantiate those numbers, then I would vote to override the spending cap as opposed to, somehow impacting public safety. Our school system just would not tolerate that in any way, shape, or form.
Mr. John, what would you do?
So this is this year's adopted budget, $265 million. And I did an analysis of the budgets going back to 2009, and the numbers for this year are a little off. So it turns out because they are using two different sets of numbers for this past fiscal year and this new fiscal year, I think fiscal shenanigans is probably one way to characterize this. Now, in the private sector, you have something called Sarbanes-Oxley. In a publicly traded company, the CEO and the CFO have to sign off on the financial statements at the risk of going to jail if you're doing something funny with the books. So if they violated the way the spending cap works, I don't think that's a really good sign for trusting in our government officials. And as I said, if you take a look at the amount of increase in the budget over the past 8 years, a $40 million increase that's running twice the rate of the Social Security cost of living adjustments. If you're a senior citizen on Social Security, the year before you got a 0% increase. I'm trying to, there's a lot of information in this budget and there's a lot to digest, but $265 million is a tremendous amount of money. And the fact that they took the wastewater enterprise funds, I believe, out of the budget, and yet they're kind of off the book somewhere. That's what led to the fiscal crisis of 2009, and we don't need that in the municipal government.
Ms. Gathright?
If, in fact, they won that case, the case is out there, the two folks that have the case out there, I would have to vote to override, particularly if it was affecting our police department, our fire department, or DPW, or our education.
Okay, thank you. We just got an audience question that relates to this. Last night, an ordinance was introduced at the Board of Aldermen meeting requiring disclosure of those who are financially supporting lawsuits against the city. Would you support this ordinance? And we're starting with Mr. Sullivan on this one.
I'm not sure that I would. Just because with a lawsuit like that, it depends on how much information and how sensitive the information is. So if you've got people that are funding it for, nefarious purposes or what have you, then yes. But if it's something as simple as just trying to maintain order within the fiscal realm of the city so that we don't have to start backpedaling in certain areas and start cutting out key structures and key parts of the budget to start recuperating losses, then I think that's for the better, just to make sure that everything stays on the level. But as I mentioned, it all depends on what information is being said, what information is being required, and what information are people willing to put out.
All right, thank you. Ms. Melizzi-Golia?
Yes, thank you. As you know, we received that ordinance last night on our desks when we entered the chamber, and it's been sent to committee. Mr. T-Boom, who's here, I just received your email as I was looking at my email with some of the information you've referenced. So I'm not making any decisions or commitments to support or not to support until I'm able to be part of a discussion and read the information that's there. Thank you.
Thank you. We understand that as a sitting alderman, you have a little different situation in answering some of these questions, so thank you. Mr. Flynn, if you were on the board?
Yeah, one of the things that's been a real eye-opener, again, I'm not a politician. I've never been involved in politics. I've never run for office before, but it has really struck me how partisan politics is somewhat prevalent here in the city. I've got to assume that the ordinance would have been introduced if it hadn't been vetted out against, I'm not a lawyer, but I've got to assume it would have been, it's been vetted out against state law, federal law, and that the ordinance in itself is compliant to whatever laws apply. I believe in transparency in government, and as a taxpayer that is paying the salary for the city attorney and all the others that are affected by this, I would like to understand the whole story as to where this is coming from, and so I guess I would support the ordinance.
All right, thank you. Do we have any cards waving around on that one?
Oh.
Ducking it, all right. Can't blame them for that one.
I have one.
No,
I forgot
I'm
about-
sorry, all right, Ms.
I
Gathright.
forgot about the card.
Okay.
I too would support that ordinance. I believe in the chamber as it is today for the most part. I believe in our mayor. I think he's made great decisions for this city. I remember this city, 38 years ago, okay? And I've watched it grow from that time until now. So I believe that if our mayor felt that this was truly important enough that we should know where those fundings are coming from, I believe we should as well. And that goes back to, as Flynn said, transparency.
All right, Mr. John, yes.
I beg to differ. If you look at the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. I think it's very dangerous if we hear that if the mayor thinks it's reasonable, it has to be disclosed, because that violates one of the fundamental freedoms that we have as United States citizens as embodied in the Constitution. And I would hope the city attorney knows the Constitution.
All right, thank you. Changing gears a little bit, all right? Okay, I thought I was getting a signal about timing. Okay, excuse me. Question about Keno. Whether or not Nashua should allow Keno in its bars, restaurants, and so on, will be on the November 7th ballot. And we're asking what your views are about Keno. Do you support Nashua participating in Keno? And we understand that the funds for this will go to support all-day kindergarten. Doesn't matter, though, whether Nashua votes yes or no, or has it or not, you're still eligible for those funds. So what do you think? Are there advantages or disadvantages to having Keno? And we're starting with Mr. John on that.
I think state sponsorship of gambling is a really bad idea. It's basically, in my view, it's a regressive tax. And in many cases, the people that can least afford to be wasting their money on a game of chance are being encouraged by the state, by the government, to be engaging in an activity that's detrimental to their financial health. So I don't think it's a really good. I don't think it's a good idea. I think the lottery. I think that's a bad idea as well. You have lots of people that end up with hopes and dreams, spending way too much money that they can't afford, and I think government sponsorship of gambling is not something that we should be supporting as a community.
Ms. Gathright?
Well, I feel that if the voters voted in, it's going to go in no matter what anyway. So my voice or anyone else's voice would not matter at that point, because if the community wants it, that's the way it would be. However, I don't believe that gambling should be tied into education. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Karen?
Yes, thank you. I think that it's important for the community to vote on this. I voted for casinos up in the State House. Unfortunately, we can't tell people how to spend their money, whether it's bingo, the racetrack casinos, or Keno. But my concern would be that the state takes back that money and Nashua doesn't get its fair share, and then we end up having to foot the total bill, which really is unfair to the community at large, because kindergarten is an important aspect for this community. So the voters are going to decide, but hopefully you'll vote positively. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. Next question is that the Safe Stations program here in the city has been very successful. Would you vote for continued funding for programs to help combat the opioid crisis? And we're starting with Ms. Malizigolya.
Yes, I would vote for continued funding. And since we started the Safe Station program, we have had a request for additional funding coming from Harbor Homes to help them provide continued services. And I think that all of us, whether we live with a family member or a friend who has issues with addiction, we're all impacted as a community by what happens within the city related to people with addiction concerns. So I think it's really important that people have resources, and if you think about some of the other things that have gone on in terms of accessing mental health services, having beds available is always a huge problem. And we've been able to put together a system here in the city where people don't have to wait. They can walk into a fire station and there's someone there, and we do what we need to do to get them the help they need. So I think it's very important that we continue supporting all of the agencies and programs that are providing this very necessary service. And I would just say, I think it's really important that we support our firemen, because our firefighters were not trained to do this. And emotionally, it's been something very different for them. So they're to be commended, and we need to remember to support them also. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn, same question.
Yeah,
Safe stations.
Yes, I believe that the city has an obligation to provide a safety net for what I would call our most at-risk citizens. People that may not have the access to, the health insurance that might help them with counseling and drug and alcohol type support. I think that the Safe Station program is absolutely amazing. I think it is a concrete way of providing that safety net to our at-risk citizens. I fully support anything. It's not just about getting help for the people. It's also, we need to continue our strong efforts to combat drug trafficking here in the city. Fully support, anything and everything that the police department is doing. They're doing amazing things. And their recognition through the Granite Hammer program, some of the grants that they've gotten because of their efforts, they are to be commended for what they do. It's not easy, and they are to be commended. The last thing I would say is, a couple of weeks ago, I saw on 60 Minutes, there was the expose on the drug companies. And I think that what the pharmaceutical companies that manufacture these opioid drugs, I think they knowingly knew what the problems were. I think they knowingly exploited the citizens of the United States. If the city had an opportunity to engage as part of a class action lawsuit against the pharmaceuticals to regain some of the costs of what we do with this, I would fully support that.
All right, thank you. Mr. John, would you support increased funding for combating the opioid crisis?
I think one thing that's amazing about this country is that people care about each other, and that in communities, people come together, whether it's through voluntary organizations or through its churches. I lived for a couple years over in Europe, and it's very different there. And if we have a successful program here that is addressing the emergency requirements of people in need, I'm all for that, and I think that's something that definitely should be continued.
Thank you. All right. Next question is about safety in the community. What's the number one thing you'd like to do to make sure that citizens feel safe in their community? And we're starting with Ms. Gathright on that.
The number one thing.
Or number two.
Well, I must say I've had the opportunity to work with Nashua Police Department over the last couple years. We came together to talk about some of the killings and things that have been going on across the United States. And one of the things that we agreed with was that we wanted to make sure that Nashua never doesn't become one of those other cities. So in working with the police department, I learned that they have so many trainings there. They're certified across the United States. They train other police departments. They have one of the best SWAT teams and that across the United States. They work specifically with our young people. They work with the citizens. They have a Citizens Academy, which I attended as well, which was great. You got the opportunity to see what happens in the patrol car, what happens when the call comes in, and et cetera. So as far as safety, personally, I feel very safe in Nashua. However, maybe not feel quite as safe going somewhere else. But here in Nashua, I definitely feel safe. Chief LaVoy and his team has been great, not just for drugs, but also for getting to know the community, which is very important. And sorry.
My timers are scaring the candidates. No, thank you for telling us about the police department. You know, and I think the same is true in Manchester, that the police department is receiving extensive training there.
Yeah.
And I've heard about that too. And it's wonderful that we're kind of ahead of the game
Yes, we are.
here. So, what is the number one thing you'd like to do to make sure citizens feel safe in their community? Ms. Karen?
Thank you. Well, safety is the first priority, and if we could get more police on the streets, that would be wonderful. I think that we have to recognize what's going on around us at all times. I am just finishing up the police academy, and I am amazed. This community can be pretty proud of its police force. With everything going on within the country, we have some dedicated police officers. They're highly trained, they're accredited, they're nationally accredited, one of only 15 in this state. People come to Nashua to find out what's going on. So I think as a community, we can be pretty proud that our police force is there to protect you and serve you. And when there's a question, this is an issue we always have, is that people forget that they can call the police department anytime. They don't have to wait till the next day, because they'd rather come out and find out it's nothing than to find out too late that it was something. So safety is the issue.
Mr. Sullivan, what would you try to do to make people feel safer in their communities?
So I feel that it's important for safety within the communities to actually get the communities involved. I've been looking a lot into a theory recently called the broken window theory, which basically states that if a window on a building is broken, inevitably every other window will be broken behind it. But if we take the time as a community to fix the broken windows as they come up, we can stop things before that they happen by reducing crime in the area, because a well-maintained community and a well-tight-knit community is less likely to have crime involved in the community, because everybody knows each other, everybody's watching out for each other. So if we're able to just come together as a cohesive unit, per se, and fix these so-called broken windows, whether it's just, your own front yard or your neighbor's fence that you offer to help fix, small things around the communities will start to add up in a very large way.
Thank you. I've got an interesting question here that refers back to last week's forum with the Alderman at Large candidates. And according to one of those candidates, the city has a surplus of several $1 million surplus. What would you do if elected with that surplus of funds, Mr. Flynn?
Well, if we're in a situation, depending on what happens with this litigation that's going on right now, I read in the paper that the mayor currently thinks we're going to have to lay off upwards of 100 firefighters and/or police officers. Where I work, whenever we budget for a program, we always retain what we call a management reserve. And that management reserve is there to, make it easier to absorb things that you may not have planned for. And if we have a multi-million-dollar surplus that is being held in reserve, then that certainly should be applied to meet whatever the financial needs of the city, such that it doesn't impose an excessively high increase on taxes or maintain the stability of the tax rate. But I don't think the city should be in the business of maintaining exceptionally high reserves.
Okay, Mr. John, what would you do with that several $million surplus?
Well, I used to be good at math, but as I get older, it's harder and harder to do it in your head. But if the mayor's saying he's going to have to lay off 100 staff, I don't know what the average salary is, but if you just say it's $50,000, that'd be like $5 million. So I'm not sure if those numbers are accurate. So if there's an actual several $million surplus, I think the city, the mayor, and the Board of Aldermen have a fiduciary responsibility. And in the financial services world, fiduciary means you have to look out for the best interests of your client, in this case, the taxpayers, and not what you want to do. So if there actually is a surplus of several $1 million, I'd say return it to the taxpayers, because it's their money. It's not the city's money. And that's the meaning of a fiduciary responsibility. And that's the number one priority of people in government, to be responsible with the property and the investments and the monies that are entrusted to them.
Ms. Gathright?
Well, I'm all for returning money for taxes, tax money. However, if that money is there, if I was going to use it, it would be for education. It would be for the buildings that we need worked on right now. And I believe that the police department, if I remember correctly, wanted to hire, was 1 or 2. I would use it in that terms, for the police department or for education, and educating not just the building, but also for the tools and things that the teachers need in order to be robust teachers, basically.
Do we have anybody using cards on this one? No? Okay, that's fine. Next question then. And this I'm going to ask of everybody, okay? Think about your ward. Which aspect of the city's infrastructure needs the most attention in your ward? And we're going to start, where am I? With Ms. Karen on that one.
Infrastructure. Well, they're just finishing up on Main Street, and we just had a big project on Burke Street with infrastructure. And then over the past year, we have been trying to make some changes for safety reasons, because we do have a lot of traffic. It is a busy road, just like All Street and Arlington Street. But I think all the city needs is their paving upgraded. And we really need to look at that, and that's why the mayor and the Board of Aldermen put in funding for paving for the next 5 years. It doesn't go far. $7 million may seem like a lot of money, but it isn't when you consider you have almost 700 miles of roadway. So I think that for Ward 7, trying to keep that in bay, and I know that we talk about Burke Street, but Burke Street at this point is on hold, but it's there if things change within the wastewater treatment plant, which is within a residential area. Thank you.
All right, before I go on with the others, if anybody has thought of any new questions and has them written down, if you hold them up, some of our student volunteers will come around and collect them. No? Okay, thank you. Mr. Sullivan, what do you see as the number one infrastructure priority in Ward 7?
Well, not to sound too much like an echo chamber, but Ms. Karen over here is exactly correct about the roads in the area. They have made a lot of headway, but what I see is most of the time when the roads do get done, they inevitably have to get pulled back up and redone again. There's actually a road down by the Rotary on Temple Street, which is right by my house, that I believe they did 3 or 4 times within the last 2 months alone. From my understanding, it was due to underground infrastructure work that had to be done. But had that infrastructure work been done up front the first time, then we wouldn't have to go back and redo these. But there has been a lot of headway done as far as the roads go. What I'd also like to see is a bit of the cleaning up of the utility lines above the streets. I know under one instance in my neighborhood, there was a house that nearly caught on fire because somebody had gone and ripped the copper grounding wire off of the electrical pole. And they thought it was a Comcast problem, which is kind of funny. Comcast showed up, informed them it was an electrical issue, and then the electrician came up to fix that. So I think just cleaning up a lot of the upper infrastructure as well is probably in our best interest.
All right, thank you. In Ward 8, Ms.
Yes,
Melizzi
thank
Golia.
you. Ward 8 has really 2 very distinct kinds of needs. And within the more residential area, single-family home area, like everywhere else in the city, one of our primary concerns is paving. But it is compounded by drainage issues throughout the ward because we have so much running water. And people who live in the ward know that you can go through one day and the roads are dry, and the next day you can just see a wet patch across the roadway where water is draining through. So I would say that for the past 8 years, there are probably 3 hot spots in the ward. My husband will tease me because sometimes I'll call him after we've had a real heavy 2 or 3 days of rain and say, hey, I'm coming home, but I'm going by Browning to see what the flooding's like. And sometimes it's been significant. But the other issue we have in Ward 8 is down around Spitbrook Road and Daniel Webster Highway. And I was happy last Thursday when I attended a public hearing on the state 10-year transportation plan to hear that it's going to be 10 years. It's right now on the plan for 2017, but they're finally beginning to look at pedestrian access down on Daniel Webster Highway and Spitbrook Road. And for those of you who drive from East Dunstable down Daniel Webster, you know there's a lot of pedestrian traffic and safety issues. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn, what about in Ward 9? What do you see as a pressing issue?
Thank you. I've lived in Ward 9 for 25 years, and for many of those years, I would look out my front picture window and thought I was looking at the lunar surface, my street, Custom Street. So I was very excited when the city adopted a paving program, and my street got repaved last year, so I'm a very happy camper out in Ward 9 right now. In general, I think the infrastructure in Ward 9 is solid. We've got a lot of great green space. The recreational fields are well maintained. I don't know if we have as much of a drainage issue as maybe in some of the other areas, but I do think infrastructure-wise, Ward 9, I believe, is in good shape. One comment I would make, I think we have an awesome public works department. Streets are plowed, trash is picked up. I think they really do a good job of maintaining the infrastructure here in the city. One of the things I'm concerned about is I don't think the Public Works Department should be in the construction business. I go back a couple of years ago, and as a person that works in writing contracts and administering contracts, it absolutely blows my mind that the Main Street project was undertaken by the city of Nashua. That's something that there should have been a statement of work that was created, it should have been put out for bid, and it should have been managed as a project using good contract management principles. There should have been incentives to the contractors to bring it in ahead of schedule, under budget, and there should have been penalties for not achieving that. That's the way it should have been done.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. John, what do you see as a big issue in Ward 9?
Well, as I said in my opening statement, in speaking with neighbors around Ward 9, there were a lot of concerns voiced about speeding. If you take a look at, for example, I think it's Mid-Dunstable Road turning into Ridge, there's a curve, and it's a posted limit of 30 miles an hour. But people come around that bend, and one lady on the corner there said she'd had several cars end up in her lawn. And that's literally, there's several curves like that. There's another one on East Dunstable where you're coming around a curve, and one of the neighbors there said that she'd seen an accident just a few doors down. I think we could have some I heard in one of the meetings somebody suggested we need to post more policemen to monitor the speed limits. I think we can take a look at automation. So there are these, if you take a look at the schools, they got the blinking signs. But you could have, where there's a posted speed limit, you could just have a monitor, maybe solar powered, that says your speed is blah when it's like 30. And I think if we had, if we found out where the most accident-prone areas are, and I named a couple of them, I think that would be a good use of public safety dollars to improve the infrastructure in Ward 9.
Thank you. That always works for me. How about the rest of you? When you see your actual speed posted, Big Brother is watching me, and I know it at that point. Ms. Gathright, what do you see as a big issue in Ward 9?
The largest is paving, and there's quite a few potholes still in Ward 9, and at least the area that I live, which is over by Harris Road, Northeastern Boulevard, in that area. So, and I came home last night. We have a water issue as well, and I drove home last night about 9 o'clock, and my street was almost flooded. And what happened was we have 2 drainage, and the leaves get stuck there, and I guess no one noticed it because it was night, raining hard, and no one else came out to get the leaves out. So that was my job in probably about a foot of water last night. So we do have an issue with some of the drains.
Okay, thank you. Not sure where I am in my sequence. I think I'm starting with Ms. Karen on this one. Are there any, no, because you're sitting, this won't work. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. This I cannot ask of incumbents, okay? Are there any recent aldermanic decisions that you disagree with, and would you seek to overturn them? So I'm going to ask this of the 4 people who are not currently on the Board of Aldermen. Mr. Sullivan?
I am incredibly far behind in my reading on the minutes of the Board of Aldermen meetings, so I cannot honestly say that I have enough information at this time to answer that question.
That's fine. Mr. Flynn?
I apologize. Could you repeat the question?
Yes. Are there any recent aldermanic decisions that you disagree with? Would you seek to overturn them?
The most recent one would be the Performing Arts Center. I would have voted for it. But again, voting for it and then being involved in the implementation of the concept and the execution of it are 2 different things. I don't think the city should be running it, but I do believe that the city can be an enabler to making it happen. I would have supported, if we're hastily I shouldn't say throwing together a plan, because I thought it was a well-documented plan from what I read. But if we're rushing to implement a strategy because we're afraid the property is going to be off the market, then let's go buy it. Let's take it off the market. Let's go back to the drawing board, come up with a more viable solution. And if we can't come up with a solution, we turn around and sell it. I don't think it would come to that, hopefully, but I would have supported it, and I guess that's something I would have maybe turned over.
All right, thank you. Mr. John, are there any recent decisions that you disagree with and might vote to overturn?
As I mentioned, with the performing arts discussion, it was a 4-hour meeting. There was a vote taken. It was 8 in favor, 6 against, meaning it didn't pass, and it should have ended right there. And then there was a sudden motion, which I believe is out of order, to just put it on the ballot. And then there was a question as to, well, do we have to have a public hearing? So I think that whole thing was pushed through. And again, I would maintain, to me, that is the Board of Aldermen abdicating its responsibility to be fiduciaries on behalf of the city. If you take a look at the pro forma, this is their own information that they presented. The Colonial Theater in Keene, New Hampshire has an operating deficit of $231,000 a year. The Spruce Peak Performing Arts Center in Stowe, Vermont, even with $243,000 in public contributions, has a $929,000 deficit, and then so on and so forth. And again, I did not see, this is public information. This is an IRS Form 990. The Palace Theater in Manchester is a 501c3 organization. You can take a look at all their financial records going back 10 years or so. And if I take a look, they have all their public contributions. In 2014, public contributions were $745,000. In 2013, $1.6 million. And they don't even have, they own the building, there's no debt service. So I don't think that the voters will be informed enough to make the right decision.
All right, thank you. Ms. Gathright,
I
any
would've-
recent ones?
I would have voted to overturn the decision so that we would be going forward with the performance.
On the Performing Arts
Yes.
Center? All right, thank you. How about changing the pace, a lightning round? Yes, no answers?
Yes.
They're okay. They're saying yes. All right. Let's see, we're going to go in reverse order this time. So Ms. Gathright, and we'll go down the row this time. Do you think it's the place of the Board of Aldermen to encourage businesses to open or remain in Nashua? Or should the government stay out of private enterprise?
Yes.
Yeah. That's my fault. I did say it was yes, no, and I'm giving you a choice.
All right.
To encourage
I
or to
think they
stay
should
out?
encourage.
To encourage.
Sorry.
Okay. No, it's my fault. I phrased it wrong.
Can you
Yes or
repeat
no?
the question, because now I'm confused?
Yes, I don't blame you. I am too. Do you think it's the place, the responsibility even, of the Board of Aldermen to encourage businesses to either open or remain in Nashua? Or should the government stay out of private enterprise? So encourage? Or mind
Encourage.
their own business? Ms. Gathright says encourage.
Yes.
Mr. John?
Life is never that simple. It depends.
Yeah.
It depends on what policies they implement. If they're tax abatements, there have been free enterprise zones that have been terrific for encouraging enterprise. If it's the city operating a business, I don't think so. So it's not a simple yes/no answer.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Flynn?
I think that the city of Nashua should be functioning in a way that we create a business-friendly environment. Without business, we don't have a tax base, and without a tax base, our taxes go up.
Thank you.
So,
Okay,
yes.
so encourage.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Ms.
I would also say we should be encouraging business.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
As Mr. John had mentioned, it is dependent on the situation, but as far as private enterprise goes, of privately owned companies, no, I don't think the government should be involved in those at all.
Ms. Karen?
Yes, I think we should encourage and help them as much as we can.
Okay, thank you. And second lightning round question, this is yes. No, it's not yes or no. What's an area in which you think the city should spend less money? Ms. Gathright, back
Wow.
down this way again.
Okay. Less money.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm not certain on that one. I can't give you an answer
Okay.
for that one.
All right. Mr. John?
I have an easy answer. If there is a surplus, they shouldn't spend it.
Okay. Mr. Flynn?
In terms of education, I support schools, I support teachers, infrastructure within the, but some of these programs, curriculum programs that are being rolled out, we need to stay and get back to basics. Money that we spend on some of these curriculums, I just don't understand. I would never be able to understand math today if they were teaching it to me. So,
Ms. Melizzi Gola?
Yeah, that's, That's really hard. I think if we're looking to spend less money, looking at efficiencies that could be accomplished by maybe combining services across several departments, which we've talked about in the past.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
There's a lot of money that goes into the beautification of simply just Main Street itself, and I think if a lot of that money was reallocated to the rest of the city as a whole, then I think the city as a whole would benefit from that.
All right, and Ms. Karen?
Yes, I too agree with my colleague Mary Ann that we could be a little bit more efficient and combine departments and organizations so that we get the most from our money.
Okay, thank you. This was supposed to be short answer. I don't know if it's going to work. What do you think is the #1 challenge facing Nashua in the next few years? You know, we're not asking for a solution here. What is the #1 challenge? Let's vary the order. We'll start with Mr. Flynn.
I think the #1 challenge in the coming years is going to be the demand for smart, informed capital investment. We've got a lot of things coming up with the school district. We've got this performing arts center. Those are all going to cause needs for capital, and we need to, that's going to we're going to have to do really smart, intelligent, well thought out things there.
Okay, Ms. Malizzi-Gola?
Yes, thank you. I think that one of our biggest challenges is going to be balancing the multiple needs within our community of all of our residents and being able to maintain the viability and vitality of our community, but at the same time not making it such that our seniors and others who may be on the lower end of the pay scale are being forced out of our community. I think our strength is our diversity, and I think being a multi-generational community, especially when so many people don't have families here in Nashua, is a real strength for all of us, for seniors as well as children and young families. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, what do you see as the #1 challenge in the next few years?
Well, I'm going to have to agree with that statement as well. I think the hardest challenge is going to be finding a common ground that helps benefit the largest common denominator of people while minimizing the fallout of the groups not included within that parameter. Additionally, I think that the challenge of keeping the younger generations within the city as opposed to letting them run off to places like Boston or New York, other places like that, we're going to have to come up with some way to get everybody involved, not just on a community, but from a corporate level, from a professional level, and from a governmental level to keep this generation here so that that generation will then create another generation within the city.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Karen?
Yes, thank you. I think our infrastructure is the key to a good community, and as we know, we're having issues with some of our buildings, which are schools. So we really need to think about that and take care of these in the future for capital, because when we get stuck in a hole and we don't have the funds, we kind of let them go by the wayside until it's too late, and then we're building off that. And we also have to think about keeping our young people here. So that means providing more housing, more affordable apartments, and making it easier for them, because we do have a big senior population that we should be looking out for as well. So,
Thank you. Ms. Gathright?
Actually, I agree with June on that. Affordable housing would be my #1 issue in Nashua, and sustainable wages, livable wages, that folks will be able to afford the apartments or buy the homes here. So that would be my first.
And Mr. John?
Well, I'm very hopeful about the future. I think we're going to be experiencing more of an economic boom as we come out of this great recession. And I think the biggest challenge will be, as the finances improve, the city government has to be very prudent about fiscal decisions. I think it's really hard when times are good, and I'm hoping the economy is improving, there's going to be more money available, and that's the time you want to be very careful about the spending, because when times are good, you need to be allocating and reserving and taking care of maintenance items in anticipation for when the next downturn happens, because we have these business cycles, and there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand. People are going to say, hey, finally we have some money, let's just go and spend it. And I think that's a big challenge. And also with an aging population, I've got 3 millennials, so I know about that end of the spectrum, but demographically speaking, we've got an aging population, and I think we have to be very careful about how we spend the taxpayers' dollars. So again, I think fiscal prudence in light of a recovering economy is paramount for the city.
You raised, several of you raised some interesting issues and questions about keeping young people in the city. How do we do that? How do we do that as a state is what I wonder. But, you know, what is it that we need to do to make Nashua an attractive place for young people so they don't, who said, don't run away to Boston? Yeah, right? You know, we don't want them all running away to Boston. And so I just wonder if any of you want to very quickly give me one concrete thing that you think would help keep young people here in the city. And some of you mentioned it, so I don't know if I just want to throw this out. Does anybody have one concrete thing you want to say that you didn't say already? Yes, Mr. Flynn.
I would like to say, I don't know if we have a problem keeping young people here in the city. The reason I say that is this. I don't think we should be, if our young adults want to go off and explore the world, they ought to go off and explore the world.
But then they should come back and support us in our old age.
Other communities where their youngins are leaving, guess what? A lot of them are coming to New Hampshire. And, you know, I work at BA Systems. I'm a mentor in our leadership development program. I work with a lot of our young professionals. I asked them about this. They love living here in Nashua. They love living in southern New Hampshire. There's a lot of good reasons for them to want to be here.
Does anybody else want to address that? I know some of you did already.
So BAE is a really good step forward as far as a way to keep a younger generation here, only because it's technology oriented. Investing more into technology jobs in the area that would allow a younger generation to do what they do best, which is to innovate with new technology, I think would be the key to keeping that generation here.
All right, thank you. We are thankful to the library for hosting this whole series of forums. So on their behalf, I am asking, who is your favorite author? Miss Melizzi Golia.
Oh, my gosh. Wow. I read an awful lot of speech and language and early childhood things. And I always go back to professionally Piaget and Vygotsky. I mean, those are like things that I read often and refer to.
All right. Mr. Sullivan?
I would have to say that my favorite author ever since middle school was R.A. Salvatore, who's the author of the Legend of Dritz series.
How many of you know that author? I'm just curious. We've got some hands up. Okay, nice. Oh, very good. All right, thank you. Ms. Karen, your favorite author?
Well, I did a lot of reading too when I was working, so now I just read for pleasure. So some of my favorite authors are J.D. Robb, who does a lot of mysteries, and James Patterson, I'm afraid.
Okay. And Ms. Gathright?
Right now, my favorite is Ayanna Zanvant, and she's the one, Peace from Broken Places, and she helps you to get through whatever you might be going through.
Very nice. Mr. John?
Reaching way back, I'd have to say my favorite author was Isaac Asimov, who was a great in the science fiction pantheon. And if you take a look at science fiction, it's amazing all those past predictions are coming true. So it's an interesting way to envision the future.
Thank you. And Mr. Flynn, your favorite author?
In terms of fiction, I am a huge fan of Tom Clancy and his novels. I've read them all. Find them very intriguing, very accurate as well. I'm also a big fan of biographical. I'm currently reading Scott Kelly's book about spending a year on the International Space Station. I just really enjoy reading stuff like that. And I just read Big Poppy's autobiography too, so I'm all over the place.
Very nice, thank you. And nobody asked me, but mine is Janet Ivanovich. I read her books as though I'm eating a bag of potato chips. I just go straight through it. All right, thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience that have come in? I don't see students running down here with any questions for me. Yes, we do. All right. Well, maybe take one more question and then have our closing statements. Thank you. All right. And this, I think this plays on something that a few of the candidates mentioned. What do you believe is the best thing that the Board of Aldermen can do to improve Nashua's sense of place and community for all its residents? And frankly, from somebody who lives way up north, you know, and in a little town, I'm always impressed with all the wonderful festivals you're having, the multicultural events and so on. So I'm very impressed with that, but I wonder if there's anything that you feel that, in addition to that, that the actual Board of Aldermen can do to improve that sense of community for all residents. And we're starting with Mr. Sullivan on that one.
So I feel that just getting out and getting the community involved together will help the community grow stronger. But as far as, you know, with my time in Germany, there was a lot of festivals out there as well called the Volksfest. And the town that I was living in at the time had a population of 15,000 people, and they threw the biggest Volksfest that you could possibly imagine. The entire city was essentially shut down for about 3 days for this festival, and it really brought everybody in the entire city together to the point where even people from other towns over were coming in to enjoy this festival. And essentially, it's just a giant carnival in the middle of the town. I'm not saying that we should have something like that, whether we shut the city down, but I think having more community events is definitely a great way to inspire people to become more of a community. And I think just getting more people out and about within the community, doing community service, community cleanup projects to help get everything together in the city, clean everything up a little bit, will help bring everybody a little bit together.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Karen? Yeah, we switched order about halfway through. I don't know if I said that.
Well, I think we do a lot of different activities. I was involved with the beginning of the Summer Fun program that has been 40 years, and we do a lot of things with the downtown. I think we need to get a little bit more diversified, maybe get more of our ethnic community involved, and become a more festival-like event. We do some things at Homan Stadium. I think we need to involve our seniors more into activities because they are a wealth of information and knowledge, and they could bring some sparkle and excitement to any kind of activities that the city could bring. But I think we're really doing a better job than we ever did. So anything we can add to it just makes it that much better.
Thank you. Ms. Gathright, what do you have as an idea?
I think we're doing a really great job, actually. And I think that in order to improve that, some sort of way we need to, and I'm not even sure how to do it, but to make sure, like she mentioned, the seniors, to make sure when they have events that it's some kind of way posted so that all of Nashua pretty much knows about it. Or if any other, say Indian Americans are having something, it's posted, it's all over. If African Americans are having something, it's posted, it's all over. I don't think we do a great job about sharing the information from one ethnicity to another. So.
Thank you. Mr. John?
I think one thing could be in terms of encouraging more volunteering and community service. I know a lot of churches will take a Sunday or two out of the year and they cancel their worship service and they have a day of service instead. And I think if there were some volunteering projects that the town could look at ward by ward or maybe downtown, where you can bring people from different areas of the community together, and there's nothing like working side by side on with somebody that you don't know, and you're painting a house or you're cleaning up a yard. I think that's a great way for people to get to know each other and to build that sense of community.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn, what's your idea?
In business today, and I'm seeing it at my own company, there's been a really big push over the past years on diversity and inclusion. And when I say diversity, I'm talking ethnic diversity, I'm talking about religious diversity, I'm talking about sexual orientation diversity. There's just so much that we can learn from just engaging with people. And we have, for example, the Greek Food Festival over at St. Philip's, which is absolutely amazing. We just had something over in the French Hill area earlier this year, the church, it escapes me right now. What I would love to see is a big diversity festival down at Homan Stadium where we bring all of these cultures together, all of these things, so that people can learn more about one another. And because it's the diversity of Nashua that I think really makes Nashua pretty special.
Thank you. And Ms. Melizzi-Golia?
Yes, thank you. I think that our diversity is certainly one of our strengths in bringing the various groups within our community, children, seniors, people from different cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, sexual orientation. Bringing people together to communicate is very important. But I think one of the other things that we've recently talked about in some meetings is just communicating that these opportunities are out there. And recently the mayor's office has started putting out a communication regarding all the events throughout the city. And so I think now our job is to make people aware of this tool so they know that they can get information there and find out what's going on in the city. I think the other thing that we need to look at is just creating spaces where people can sit and engage with one another that are comfortable within the community. I had an opportunity to hear someone who works in business and economic development for the governor, and he commented that our downtowns are becoming community living rooms, and I kind of like that concept. You go downtown, you sit in a coffee shop, and someone says, oh, you're reading that book, or, oh, I overheard you talking about this, and I think we need to create more of those types of spaces or that sense of community throughout the community. Thank you.
All right. I think at this point we're going to ask the candidates in 1 minute to tell us something they wanted to share with the voters but haven't had the opportunity to in the questions we have asked. So 1 minute, closing statements, and Mr. Sullivan, you drew the card to start this, so you're up.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah.
All right, so basically, just want to thank everybody for coming out this evening. Should you have the opportunity to vote on November 7th and are considering for a slight change of the guard for Ward 7, feel free to write me in on that day due to unfortunate circumstance involving paperwork and a vacation. I'm not on the ballot. Anyway, the approach that I'm running on for right now is a common sense approach to get everything connected, everything back together, start being a lot more responsible with spending, a lot more responsible and transparent with government. So if you have a question, we should be able to answer that question without having to go out of our way to say, not at this time, or we don't have time for this, or whatever. So we should just be able, as community leaders, to be approachable by everybody to answer any questions that you may have about what's going on.
Ms. Karen?
Oh, yes, thank you. I would like to thank everyone for participating tonight. I would like to continue as your alderman for Ward 7. I feel that I've been able to bring some good things to our ward. I would like to be able to rectify problems that you may have. We try to take phone calls and try to establish what the problem is and trying to get people connected to the right places. I would like to know that I will be responsible for tax dollars. Also to make sure that the Ward 7 gets its fair share of public works and community improvements to make Ward 7 and the city as a whole a safe and happy place to live. Thank you.
Ms. Gathright?
Yes, I'm dedicated and trustworthy. I have a special love for people and for the city of Nashua. I act as a resource for churches, organizations, nonprofits, sharing information that's provided throughout the city. I participated in many programs that the city offers, such as the City Academy and the Police Academy. I'm currently, or recently, began to participate in Hillsborough County Diversion Pretrial Services Working Group. So I'm very much in the community and very much into things that are happening in the community that affects all of us and our children. So I ask for your vote on November 7th, Ward 9, Alderwoman. Thank you.
Mr. John?
I believe Nashua can retain its reputation as one of the best places to live in America and one of the best-run cities. But in order for that to happen, I think that the Board of Aldermen needs to be fair, F-A-I-R, in its governing role. F is fiduciary responsibility for property and funds entrusted by the citizens. A for accountability, being open and transparent. I for innovation, continuous improvement, always looking for better ways and more efficient ways to do things. And R for respect, respect for everyone. Please visit my website, ijnh.org. That's IJ, my initials, nh.org. And I ask for your vote on November 7th for Ward 9 Alderman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not a politician, okay? I'm running because I love supporting people in the city. And I want to continue to do that through hopefully being the Ward 9 Alderman. I don't have a political machine that supported me. Nobody was holding my sign outside the library when I walked in tonight, all right? Historically, this type of election tends to be a low turnout election. I need people to come out to support my way of thinking, allow me to come and support my neighbors and the citizens of Nashua. So I implore the people that are here tonight, people that are going to be watching this on television, please get out and vote. This is not an election to sit on the sidelines. If not for the candidates that are up here tonight, there's a couple of important ballot questions, and there's some other, campaigns that are going on that are going to be critical to what happens in the city in the next couple of years. So please get out and vote, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
And Ms. Melizzi-Gold.
Thank you. Thank you. First, thank you to the Telegraph, the League of Women Voters, the Nashua Public Library, and the students from South, as well as all of you in attendance this evening for providing this opportunity for all of us. My goal as Alderwoman has always been to listen to the thoughts and concerns of my constituents, to provide them with information, and to respond as best I can to provide additional information or have their needs and concerns addressed. Most importantly, in talking with the residents of my ward, working towards supporting budgeting that maximizes the use of your tax dollars to provide the services and programs that not only support maintaining the character of the ward and the vitality of the city, but at the end of the day, making sure that the value of your property is maintained, and that when you get ready to sell your house, you're looking at providing an opportunity for someone else to come in and be interested in living within Ward 8. Thank you.
So at this time, I'm going to lift my ban on applause as we thank all the candidates for their answers. Just a reminder that tomorrow night is the Board of Education Forum in the big room on this lower level. And then on November 1st, tell your friends in wards 1, 2, and 3 that we will have a forum for that. This will be on YouTube, on the library's website within a few days, and it will be on Access Nashua, so you can Google that, and you will be able to tell your neighbors to watch it. Thank you for your thoughtful questions and your participation. Thank you for coming. Good night.